America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone. Hey everyone, welcome back to Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation, and today we're joined by Doug Kantor. Doug's the general counsel for the National Association of Convenience Stores, and he's joining us today to talk about the swipe fee debate. And for those of you who don't know, swipe fees are related to the credit card charges that businesses pay every time we swipe. And if you're anything like me, I do not carry cash anymore. Like, it's very rare that I actually have any dollar bills in my wallet at all. So Doug, thank you so much for joining us to talk about this and help our audience understand why this is such a big deal and a massive cost for businesses, which what happens to those massive costs? They get passed on to consumers, right?
Exactly right. Well, thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah. The big thing that I always see is when I go get your nails done, this is probably more geared towards obviously female consumers, but when you get your nails done and you get your hair done, they want you to pay the tip in cash, or they charge you kind of a little extra on top of your tip to cover that credit card fee. And unfortunately, I always end up having to pay it because I don't carry cash. But that's kind of where I see it. In learning about this issue with our small business owners, it's massive. I mean, tell us how big it is.
It really is massive. Just in a global sense, the fees that merchants of all kinds pay, from the biggest stores down to the local beautician, $187 billion a year. I mean, it is just staggering. If you average it out across the U.S. population, it's $1,200 per family every year. It's really just amazing that this much gets sucked out of the economy and people don't know. They don't notice. It's really only when you get these slightly different than usual cases of where, like the beautician says, "Oh, geez, will you pay me the tip in cash?" Where you think, why is that? What's going on there? Well, this is why, because otherwise a huge part of that tip goes away. And by the way, in places where you don't see it, say the local restaurant, what have you, when you tip on that credit card, that's great. But usually the restaurant has to go into their own pocket to make up the fee that got pulled out of the tip amount just to make the server whole. None of that is the right thing.
Actually, I've had servers in some restaurants, just hint that they would love for me to leave cash instead of put it on the card. And because they've told me that the restaurants take it out of their tips.
Look, that does happen as well. And it's a tough question. You can understand for the restaurant why it's a hard thing. It's not their money. What are they supposed to do? And just to give you a sense of things, look, the restaurant business has been hit especially hard in the last few years since the pandemic. Lots of restaurants have gone out of business. The fees just since 2020 are up 70%. So that's why you see things like the restaurant saying, you know what, guys, we can't do that anymore. We can't make up for the fees that come out of the tip. We're barely making it ourselves. You really have started to get these problems because the fees have run out of control.
Yeah, exactly. And your organization, the National Association of Convenience Stores, or NACS, you all are representing. Tell us who your members are.
Sure. So there's about 152,000 convenience stores across the country. They're everybody from the little shop in the ground floor of an office building, or sometimes in a hotel, to what you think of as the local gas station that has a little store in there and everything in between. Um, and They, interestingly, are overwhelmingly a small business industry. 60% of those 152,000 stores are single store operators. And about 2/3 of them have 10 stores or fewer. So these are small business people trying to make a go of it. If you look even at the gas stations, most people don't understand this, but if you see a BP sign or Exxon or Shell or what have you, the major oil companies own less than 0.5% of the locations out there. Those are all essentially like franchisees. They're local business owners. They get the right to put the sign up. They promise to buy fuel from that provider, but they're running their own business. And so these guys do get hit very hard by these fees because they have a lot of transactions, and especially in the store, they have a lot of small transactions where the fees really eat into what are tiny profits on selling somebody a coffee or a soda or something like that.
Right, right. Yeah, I can imagine that they would be hit very hard, and that primarily probably with the selling of the gas and going in and then buying something else is primarily all credit cards. There's not even an opportunity to see a lot of cash come in.
That's exactly right. It used to be a very heavily cash business, but most people are like you now, Elaine. They don't carry a lot of cash around. They're paying with a card, and that's fine, as long as the fees don't run out of control, and now they have.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So talk to me about, explain why the fees, like who are the credit card companies that are, we've got Visa and MasterCard. Talk to us about why we have this monopoly or duopoly that's essentially been created here, and walk us through that. Help people understand why these fees are so high.
Yeah. So what's interesting is both Visa and MasterCard started as associations of all these banks or credit unions. We get our credit cards from a bank or a credit union.
Mm-hmm.
That's who actually gives us the line of credit, gives us the card, etc. Visa and MasterCard were literally just associations. So they're like my association, NACS, or somewhat like the Job Creators Network. They're membership organizations. Mm-hmm. But they went a step farther than anybody else in this position would go. And they said, you know what? We're going to tell everyone how much to charge. And so Visa and MasterCard tell their bank members, when a merchant accepts your card, here's the schedule of rates that you can charge them. And all the banks say, this is great, right? We don't have to compete with each other on price. So yeah, we'll agree to that. And over time, that's meant the fee schedules get bigger and bigger and bigger. And even when Visa and MasterCard became independent companies and had IPOs and sold their stock on Wall Street, they kept operating the same way with banks on their board, all that sort of thing, and saying, well, we just have to keep setting these fees higher so the banks will like us and put us on their card. It's really a problematic system. I often tell people it's literally, if you read it, the dictionary definition of a cartel, that's how Visa and MasterCard operate. And so what's a small business supposed to do about that? There's not much you can.
So what are the barriers to entry for another credit card company processor coming in and competing with Visa and MasterCard?
Well, that is super interesting because Visa and MasterCard have locked up all the banks and credit unions across the country. The barriers to entry are very high, right? They would have to convince these folks who are beneficiaries of a cartel structure to move outside of it, right? And do business independently. That doesn't work very well. The last actual successful market entrant into the credit card network market was Discover Card in the early 1980s. That's the last time we had somebody break into this. And the Department of Justice has sued Visa again and again and again because they do everything they can to block any new entrant from coming into the market. Just this past week, the Department of Justice won a motion to dismiss against Visa in another lawsuit against them on debit cards. So it just keeps going round and round where that duopoly finds ways to erect these barriers and nothing can get through.
So what about American Express? Because from what I understand, their fees are even higher. How does that work?
So American Express, for the most part, because of the way Visa and MasterCard have blocked things, they have to go outside the traditional banking system, right? They have a few cards that individual banks issue, but otherwise American Express, the company itself, gives you or me that credit card. And they have to go it alone without all the banking infrastructure, without people, using their normal bank, et cetera. And what they really do is they just price off of the market that's been set by Visa and MasterCard. American Express is maybe 14% of the market, maybe 15% of the market. What we've seen in other countries where they've regulated here, other countries have regulated Visa and MasterCard and brought down their rates precipitously. They, for the most part, have not regulated American Express. As soon as they did that, American Express dropped their fees because they couldn't maintain a number that much different than what Visa and MasterCard did anyway in setting the market. So they're just following in line with what the cartel says. And American Express will say, hey, we have a slightly higher income card holder. They're a more attractive customer. So you can justify paying a little bit more. And most merchants say, fine, it's not that much different. It's about all the same. But they can't have a big difference. And so if Visa and MasterCard actually had to do business the right way, Amex would too, Discover would too.
So we've done some polling on this because I know there's some legislation out there, the Credit Card Competition Act. And I'm going to have you explain what that is in just a second. But I just want to share with our audience what the polling, because we do a poll of small business owners, national poll, and we ask them if they support federal legislation to lower credit card swipe fees by injecting more free market competition, not price fixing or anything like that, but just saying, let's lower some of those barriers. 83% of small business owners. That's insane. That's the highest number I've seen on any poll question since I've been doing this poll. And I'm just, I'm shocked about that. First, tell us about the Credit Card Competition Act and how it will help inject competition.
So the Credit Card Competition Act, what it says is, okay, Visa and MasterCard, you're going to fix these fees for all the bank competitors. If you're going to do that, then the largest banks, the ones with over $100 billion in assets, have to offer an alternative to the merchant taking the card. There's about a dozen other networks out there that mostly operate on debit cards. Folks like Star and Pulse and Nice usually see their logos on the ATMs or maybe on the back of a debit card. As well as American Express and Discover Card, potentially. But it says, hey, have a competitor and then let the merchant choose. They can go, send the transaction over Visa. They can send it over Pulse or Star. And then at least you'll have some competitive market dynamics there and some competitive options and pricing. And that would then lead you to have an actual market price rather than just a price fixed price, which would be much better for everybody. And I would say, look, with respect to the polls, we've seen that a number of times. This is incredibly popular, certainly among small businesses, even when lots of these organizations, and I wouldn't be surprised if job creators the same, have some small banks within their small business membership too. Mm-hmm. And it's still polling at these incredibly high levels. But when you poll the public, you get similar 50, 60 point spreads in terms of popularity, where everybody understands that these credit card companies are ripping us off. Most people just don't understand how, when you point out how and say, oh, we've got a solution to it, people are very eager to get to that solution.
Now, this legislation is bipartisan. Who are the who are some of the, and it's been introduced in the Senate, correct? Is there a sister bill in the House?
So there has been in past Congresses, they haven't introduced a standalone bill in the House or Senate this Congress. It was an amendment introduction in the Senate this year, but
Okay.
but it always has been very bipartisan. So in the Senate, Roger Marshall, Republican from Kansas, and Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, are the two leads. In the House, Lance Gooden, Republican from Texas, and Zoe Lofgren, Democrat from California, are the two leads. And then there are a number of co-sponsors of both parties. And I should note in the last Congress, the current Vice President, J.D. Vance, was one of those co-sponsors when he was a senator. These are folks that don't often agree on a lot of things, but they are all people who recognize when there's a problem that's hitting everyday people in their wallets and pocketbooks, that we ought to do something about it when it's unfair. And so they've looked at this and said, yeah, this one's unfair. We ought to fix it.
And I just think, I mentioned in the beginning, I don't think consumers really understand that this is like a hidden tax being passed on to us. The only time that I am made aware of it, I mean, I know because I know, what we do, but the only time as a consumer I'm made aware of it is, like I mentioned, when I get my hair done or my nails done. And that's because they say, oh, hey, or what else? Government, entities. So I just renewed my tags, had a birthday, renewed my tags, and I did it on their online system. And by doing that, they charge an extra, a couple of percentage points for the credit card fee. So government entities are also charged. But as consumers, that's the only time we're made aware of it. And it just takes me back to just sort of the fundamentals of free enterprise and price transparency and understanding what we're paying. Because when you have hidden taxes, these are taxes that are passed on to consumers, and we ultimately pay them. I mean, that's just the reality. And I just think consumers don't understand that. And the other thing is, I see another argument against the credit card competition besides the price fixing argument, and that is all of the goodies we get with our credit cards, all of the points, and so the way that I see when I see things moving on the hill on this legislation is they scare the public, and you're going to lose your rewards, you're going to lose your points, you're going to lose write your congressman about this, to vote against this legislation because you're going to lose all these wonderful rewards and things like that. Talk about that piece of it, because as consumers, we compare credit cards by, do they charge an annual fee? And do I get miles for my, airline or my hotel, or do I get money back, or, what do I get if I take your credit card?
Yeah, these arguments are amazing. I mean, let me start with kind of the price setting or what have you, because this is an amazing, like, upside down world type through the looking glass argument where they'll say, oh no, this bill, it's like setting the prices or fixing the prices. It's the opposite. Today we have these fixed prices that are a problem where all the banks charge the same thing. And the bill would actually just say, no, create for the biggest banks, let there be competition. Who knows what the price will be? The bill doesn't say that anywhere. It's just a free market bill. On the rewards piece, what's amazing about it is, look, this is exactly how banks try to get each of us to use their credit card. Oh, we'll give you all these rewards. Whether you have the legislation or not, they'll still be 100% incentivized to offer rewards to get you to use their card versus another one. It's one of the few reasons why many people use one card rather than another one. And banks, this is an amazing statistic. Banks in the United States have the single highest average profit margins of any industry in the United States. They're 30%.
Wow.
Retail profit margins are 3%. The bank profit margins are bigger than big oil, big pharma, big tobacco. You can name any industry that you want to potentially say, oh, they're ripping people off. Banks make higher profit margins. The idea that they couldn't offer rewards with the highest profit margins of any industry is silly when every other company, all these retailers, local restaurants, everybody has loyalty rewards. So that's one. Two, where they've regulated around the world, they still offer rewards. In Europe, their fees are 1/7 or 1/8 the rates they are in the US. They have rewards, they have airline miles, they have all of those things. Here's the numbers, and the numbers just make it as stark and clear as possible. I told you at the outset, there's 187 billion a year in swipe fees. The credit card companies also make 125 billion in interest and consumer fees, annual fees, late fees, all those kinds of things. Look, people with rewards cards will know they keep hitting these annual fees and making them higher and higher too. So you're talking about more than $300 billion in revenue. All the rewards they give out are $41 billion. They could give out like 7 times as high rewards today. They just don't, right? Because they like keeping the money. Fine. I get it.
Right.
Everybody should, be motivated to make a profit. But this entire bill is only estimated to save 17 billion. Now that's a big deal for local retailers and small businesses. It's a lot of money, but it's not the difference between 300 billion in revenue and 41 billion in rewards. Come on. It's just a joke. They're going to still offer all the same rewards. They will hardly notice. Main Street will notice that the fees have gone down.
Well, that was my next question is, will consumers see do you think consumers would actually, it would kind of trickle down? I know some people hate that trickle down word, but we think it will trickle down to consumers in savings, or is this primarily going to be between the business and the bank? As far as seeing that.
There is no question whatsoever. Unless you don't believe the free market economy works, consumers get the savings. Retail, as I said, 3% profit margins. That's not because they don't like making money. It's because it's an incredibly competitive business, right? Any retailer would love to have higher margins, but there's somebody down the street trying to undercut them on price every single day. So if they all get savings, somebody could try to keep it, but they're going to lose business to the guy down the street who says, you know what, now I can cut my prices a little. We've seen this before. Look, when debit cards had some regulation after 2011, retail profit margins did not go up 1 cent. They stayed exactly where they were, even though retailers were saving billions of dollars on these debit card fees. Well, what happened to that money? Obviously, if retailers didn't profit anymore, consumers were getting that back in pricing. And you can see that in the consumer price index went up half as fast as the wholesale producer price index. So retailers were all paying, not over the next few years, 9% higher costs for goods, but they only raised their prices less than 4.5%. That's the kind of power you get when you reduce business costs, is consumers do see those savings.
So you mentioned it hasn't been introduced as a standalone, but it's as an amendment. Where is it at right now?
So it was introduced as an amendment to this stablecoin legislation, the Genius Act in the Senate. Unfortunately, they decided not to have any amendments. There were lots of things trying to amend the Genius Act, but procedurally they couldn't agree, Democrats and Republicans, on which ones to have, how many to have, et cetera. So it didn't get a chance to get a vote. So we'll have to see what the next opportunity is for this to come up.
Okay. Because, we've talked about it a lot at some of our conference with our board, and I mean, our small business owners are definitely interested in seeing it pass and seeing it come to fruition. And although I've read those pushbacks on the price fixing, none of them see it that way. They just see it as more choices and the free market and free choice, more choices, more price transparency. That's how we get to the best prices, the best quality, is through competition. And unfortunately, I do see them scare consumers that they're going to lose all their goodies in their credit card rewards. What's that site? The Points Guy.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is unfortunate. Look, the some of what they've said on this has actually been fact checked by some of these third party fact checkers and said it's completely false. I mean, they actually go out there and say there is a bill to get rid of your rewards. Well, obviously, there's not a bill to get rid of your rewards. This bill is just to add some competition to the system. Even if you thought it was going to get rid of your rewards, it's not a bill intended to get rid of your rewards. That's not what it's doing. So what they've been telling people really is a completely misleading scare tactic. And we can be sure, because we've seen it around the world, it won't get rid of rewards. Those will be just fine. Um, this will be a really good reform for consumers, because right now they don't even see how they're getting ripped off.
Right, exactly. And like I said, I mean, our poll, I just actually had a briefing with the Small Business Committee on our polling data, and the Senate, on the Senate side, the Senate Small Business Committee, and brought it up. 83%, that's Democrats, Republicans, and independents. When you see those kinds of numbers, this is something that's popular. This is something that would pass, and it's important to small business owners. So I definitely share that information when I'm talking to the Small Business Committee, so that they understand what's important to small business. We're obviously, the big news right now is obviously the one big beautiful bill, but when we start talking about other issues like this, these are big costs, big line items when you're a retailer, that's really impacting your bottom line, your ability to hire and grow your business, and create more benefit for your not only your customers but your employees. And that's important. And so those are the types of things that we're able to share, and we do share with the Small Business Committee out there when we talk to them about our polling. So it's good data, and I mean, I think you're on the right side of this for sure.
Well, appreciate that, and appreciate all the work you have done on it. It is a top priority for our members, because just like you hear from your small business members, our folks will tell you these credit card fees are their second highest operating cost. Only labor's higher. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, when when that's your number two line item, that is something that would get your attention, for sure. So, well, what can people do to bring more attention to it, to have their congressman hear about it? Is there something on your site they can go to and have their voices heard?
Absolutely. They can go to our website at convenience.org, and write to their member of Congress, contact their member of Congress, or they can go to, we have a merchantspaymentscoalition.com. They can also do that there. And I'm sure they can do that through Job Creators. You guys have done fantastic work on all of this. But, I always tell our folks, look, however you can, talk to your member of Congress, call them, set up a meeting back home. Most folks who don't do this would be surprised how eager their members of Congress and their staffers are to hear from you. That's their job. They're supposed to represent you. So let them know what you think.
So convenience.org or merchantspaymentscoalition.com. You can find out more information and have their voice heard, and they can just contact their elected representative directly. Well, Doug, thanks so much for joining us today on Main Street Matters, America's Small Business Megaphone. And thank you all for taking the time to tune in. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network, and new episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast from, and we'll be back soon with another episode. Bye for now.